Again, my name is Lon Coleman, and I am a member of a donor family. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the sequence of events that day and a little bit about my brother. It was May 10th, 7 years ago and 2 days, actually. The anniversary of his accident was on Monday. That we got a phone call about 5:30 in the morning from the State Police of Michigan saying that my younger brother and my parents' youngest son of 4 had been in a pretty bad car accident. As an older brother, immediately I'm supposed to take care of him. And then as the protector of the rest of the family, as soon as he was well enough to get out of the hospital, I thought I was going to put his little butt right back in there for putting my family through this. So we headed down to Hurley, the emergency room department down there. I picked up my brother Brandon and met the second brother Trevor, on the way. As we got closer to the hospital, you start to think things of how bad things could be, but it can't happen to us, and it sure as heck couldn't happen to my brother Chase. I mean, the kid got out of about every predicament that there is to get out of, and he always come out, smelling like a rose. We pulled into the emergency room at Hurley Hospital that morning, and right away we were greeted in the parking lot. A nurse came up to me right away and said, "Are you here for Coleman?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you need to follow me." And right away I knew that we were kind of in trouble. Very rarely do people know your name when you go into a hospital emergency room like that unless something pretty bad has happened. As I followed the nurse into the doors, I looked to the right, and they said, "There's a special waiting room over there for you, and maybe some social workers." And I looked down the hall, and I see my parents sitting in the room, and some waiting room chairs, and 2 state police officers were standing in the room with my parents. Again, a reminder that we may be in for a long day. But nonetheless, you always hope for the best. I think Dr. Yagi also said that their transplant starts at the door. And it's just kind of ironic that every speech that I give, I always mention that nurse that caught me in the parking lot. So Dr. Yagi, it's before the door. It was at the parking lot that I knew we were in trouble. Emergency room doctors approached us and said that things didn't look good, but it was at this time maybe 6 a.m., 6 o'clock in the morning. You as a donor family, or even at this time just a family of an accident victim, things are blurry. Things happening so fast. You listen to what the doctor's saying, but you're not really comprehending anything that's said. They basically told us that morning in the ER that we lost my brother, but they wanted to move him up to neuro ICU on the 5th floor. To continue testing and just to confirm what they had already found. And as a family, that's all you hear is testing, because tests can pass and fail. And that little guy up there didn't fail too many tests, maybe in school, but not in life. So family gathered our things out of that waiting room with the state police officers, and we moved it up to neuro, 5th floor, ICU, Hurley Medical Center, room 520, right in the corner. Again, looking back on it, I realized that our family was treated differently. They allowed about 20 people in that room that day, when you're not allowed 20. But they knew what they were doing. They were allowing a family to say goodbye to a 20-year-old kid who had no real injuries. I mean, he had a little nick on his ear, a small cut on his lip, and his worst visible injury was basically a seatbelt burn. So the day progressed, and again, more tests and tests pass and fail. And to be honest, the longer the day went on, the more optimistic we got. There was never really any good news that come out of any of these tests, but the day took 17 hours. I mean, we're there for 17 hours, and he's sleeping. There's nothing wrong with him. I'm just waiting for him to wake up. We can take him home. Well, being separated from the situation, it was easier for me to take on an administrative role for the family and continue to go back and forth between my brother's room and the nurse's station. And I continued to do this to answer questions that my parents may have, and also to gather information from the medical team and filter it out to what I think my parents could handle or comprehend at that time. So I continued my path between the nurse's station and that corner room, 520. And again, all these tests were going on. My dad was a wreck. My mom was kind of still in shock, and I was doing my administrative thing. Next comes an apnea test, which I think I've heard mentioned already here today. And every time I come to these things, I get more and more educated in the process and how I feel like I was selected to do this. So I asked the nurse if one of us could be with my brother during this apnea test, because the last thing I wanted was him to be alone when they shut off a ventilator. I mean, he's my youngest brother. I mean, I don't want him in there not being able to breathe and no one being with him. And then she said no. Normally it's just reserved for a neurosurgeon, a respiratory therapist, maybe a nurse. Room has to be quiet, dark. I said, I understand. At the other end of the neuro ICU at Hurley was another special waiting room for us that we had, and we had probably 35 people or so waiting in this room. And as I was walking down, my nurse, as I call her, puts her arm around me and says, I'm sorry that you really can't be in here. I said, I understand. And we get down to our room, and I sit at a large table next to my dad, across from my brothers, and it was about 10 or 15 minutes, and my nurse came back in and says, I talked to the neurosurgeon, and he has no problem if you would like to participate in this test. And at that point, I looked at the rest of my family and almost willed them, would somebody else like to do this, because I really don't want to. But they kind of voted me to do it. So I took the walk back down to that corner room. And while I was there, I had a problem. Here's my youngest brother, my parents' youngest son, laying in a hospital bed, and I'm not sure what I want to happen. I don't want to be there for his last breath because I don't want to hear it. I don't know if I can handle it. But I want him to breathe, but I don't want him to be a vegetable because I don't think he could handle that. So I have three scenarios. Either he doesn't breathe, I hear his last breaths, or he's a vegetable. And only one of those scenarios are good, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. We proceeded with the apnea test, and my brother didn't take a breath in that room. And that was pretty tough. But I'm ashamed to say that I was almost relieved. So I turned and I walked back down to that waiting room where I had 35 friends and family, knowing the outcome. And I knew what was going to happen when I walked in that room. I was going to have a lot of eyes on me wanting to know what happened. And my nurse came up to me again and said, "This is not your job. You don't have to do this." She said, "You tell them that we're waiting for the results of the apnea test, and the neurosurgeon will let them know what happened." And I knew that was the right move, and she was probably the smartest person on the floor that day, because when I looked in my dad's eyes, there was no way I could have told him what I just saw. Back and forth to my nurse's station, probably the 100th trip that day, I was sitting there looking down at the countertop, and ICU, just a regular laminate Formica countertop that's burned into my head, that design. Because as I was sitting there looking down, again, almost ashamed to say, there was a nurse next to me, and I was almost irritated that someone else was there. And she looked at me and she said, "I know what you're going through. I lost my son when he was 19. And immediately I got tunnel vision on this one person, and I said, I need to talk to you. You can tell me what's going on. Like, what are my parents going through? And she told me she was a gift of life. And she asked if we'd ever considered organ donation. And up until that point, we've never talked about it as a family, never knew that it was even going to be a possibility that day. And I said, no, but let me figure out how we can do this. So I gathered my two brothers, and together we said, Mom and Dad are going to be approached with this question of organ donation. What are we going to do? And we decided that whatever they decide, we were going to go with it, and if we disagreed, we'd discuss it when we go home. But we have to back Mom and Dad today, no matter what decision it is, if it's right or wrong. I approached my mom first, and she was just kind of nodding, yeah. And I don't think she really understood the complexity of the question. Dad was a different story. Dad's a big guy, intimidating guy. And I said, Dad, you got a healthy son in there that could benefit other people. And he said, I'm not giving up hope yet. And I knew I should stop right there. And we did. But throughout the day, I think Dad also knew what was going to happen and what wasn't going to happen. And at the end of the day, he said that he did agree to donate Chase's organs. My brothers went on with Gifted Life representatives to answer personal questions about Chase. And I decided that it was time for Mom and Dad. They need to go home. So I asked my aunt and uncle if they would get my mom and dad out of there. And I found myself in the room with my brother, alone for the first time all day. I took on that administrative role. I never dealt with the fact that he's laying there, and it was tough. I'm glad my mom and dad got out of there, and I'm glad my brothers got done with the Gifted Life representative when they did, because I was kind of losing it. We decided that we were going to be the last 3 people to see my brother, and we left him. If anyone was going to leave him there, it was going to be his brothers. We've always traveled in 4. If you've never been to Hurley ICU, I hope you never have, there's a set of double doors at the end that marks the ICU hallway, I guess, marks ICU from the regular floor. And those are the toughest set of double doors that I've ever went through to leave him behind. The next morning happened to be Mother's Day. We get a call from my nurse at Hurley who said that she stayed with my brother all night long, and she bathed him, and she made sure that she never left his side. And that's probably the most comforting thing that my mother has ever gotten on Mother's Day. And to this day, that nurse has no idea the impact that she's had in our family just by that. A couple weeks later, we get a letter from the Attorney General from the state of Michigan that lists everything that my brother was able to donate. A kidney went to a grandmother of 3. A kidney, pancreas went to like a grandmother of 15. I don't remember how many it was. It was just incredible. Left lung went to a father of 2. Right lung went to another person. Heart went to a father of 5. And it really put things into perspective for my family. And I think, to me, it gave me another administrative duty to do so I don't have to focus on this. Without that letter and without the knowing of my brother's gifts to 7 other people that he saved the lives of that day and on Mother's Day, and countless others with his tissue and bone, my family would have nothing. I come up here and I learn new things from this medicals community every day, every time I do one of these speeches. But there's one thing that I think I can teach you, is all of your stats and all of your numbers don't ever take into account what you've done for donor families. All those successful transplant numbers up there can't even touch what you've done for my family. You can't count it. You can't count how many extended family members that have been helped with Dr. Hagan or Mr. Gould. My parents can sleep well at night because sometimes they just shake their head and they realize that my brother had a destiny to save other people. He lived 20 years on this earth, and he lived it his way and in a good way. So I hope that you guys take that back, that every successful transplant, multiply that by 10 at a minimum. Because the donor families, you can't count us. But you also don't hear from us very often. You don't hear from us telling you thank you, what you give us. We had no choice in the outcome of my brother's accident, and neither did you, because you tried. But without this, I'm not sure where my family would be. It'd be nothing but a loss. At least we have something. We've met both of my brother's lung recipients. We've met the kidney and pancreas recipient. And we've met my brother's heart recipient. His heart recipient, our families have gelled into one. I talk to the guy all the time. It's a fantastic relationship. So with that being said, I hope I educated you just as much as you educate me at every